these organizations are on the up and up until somebody gets appointed ahead of it, and then they can
direct it and control it and
turn it into a political weapon of some kind, like the IRS.
Exactly, and that was another classic example of an agency that was doing a creditable, necessary job with honorable people, and then again, the people are appointed and others, and it became a political tool.
A political tool, that's right.
Some time ago, we talked about the Judicial Watch and some of the things they have been uncovering, and they've done a tremendous job with the deep state and others exposing this and filing lawsuits. But again, you have another problem with lawsuits, and that is who was appointed the judge and what the judge's rulings are. You've removed what I call the creditable, honorable people that traditionally upheld and believed in the Constitution and every part of it that was there.
You have to vote and vote for honest people, or they're going to come in, subvert it, turn it into a political tool instead of doing the job it's supposed to do to protect the American people.
This has increased slowly over the years. That's a very hard job because we have to make the people become more informed, more attentive to what's going on and why, and take it active because the voters of America have the power still. Constitution change some of these things.
Here is someone, Rich Pearson, just came in. Rich, we're talking about the presentation by Kevin Shipp, and he's talking about the shadow government. He includes the CIA, other groups here that are in the shadow government. And then he also talks about the deep state and all these things. And Ed was just saying, and it seems that he's right, that a lot of these agencies started for good reasons and run by good people and can have good people, but sometimes they get a leader appointed to them that tries to turn the whole thing into a political tool. Now, we're thinking of the IRS.
I'm a firm believer that power corrupts, and when you couple secrecy, perfect recipe for pure corruption. And that's what we've got going on in a lot of these federal agencies, these secret dark agencies that nobody even know that exist. And they're sucking up hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
Tax money.
Nobody authorized them to do it. Nobody even knows they're doing it. And if you want to ask them about it, then you're accused of espionage and treason and things of this nature. Congress needs to look into these things and quit being so afraid of some of these deep state actors and get into doing the things that we put them there to do instead of working for their own self-interest.
And try to clean up some of the corruption that goes on in some of these agencies.
That's why I think some of these agencies, or many of these agencies, are so afraid of Donald Trump. He said before he even got elected that he was going to look into some of these agencies and get a lot of stuff done that they didn't want done. Historically, whenever somebody sticks their head up, starts making waves and making powerful enemies, something negative happens to them. Lincoln, Kennedy, King Jr., anytime anybody goes against the establishment, something happens to them.
Right. And these people have a lot of power and they want to keep it, and they don't want you asking questions.
And it's very unfortunate that we've gotten to that point as a nation, that we've allowed ourselves to get to that point as a nation.
Trump is in their way, would you say?
Oh, he's not only in their way, he's keeping them from doing things that they want to do and shining the light of speculation on what they're doing. And they don't like it. They like being able to operate behind the scenes in dark shadows without any accountability.
And at the same time, Simon, they threaten to the point that they will do anything to maintain that power.
Now, it seems to me that in going through these videos that what they call the mainstream media is under control of a lot of these deep state people, and they do what they tell them. In other words, people like George Soros, people in the deep state or shadow government, tell them what to put on the news and what not to.
Well, Dr. Simon, if you go back to the 60s, and this is where all this started, was the Weathermen and other groups that were doing everything they could to take over. It wasn't working. They had a meeting in San Francisco and decided that we've got to go this a completely different way from the inside. And what they did was said we've got to infiltrate the media, academics, and the judicial system. Every one of you to change your majors and all that and go into those fields. So what we see today is the results of that developed in the 60s that came forward. And those are the people that are in the positions who were out originally to destroy the United States, and that's the ultimate goal. We cannot have a utopia, a one-world order, without destroying the existence of the character and constitutionality of the United States. So this is where they're all working. And then the people you talk about, the media, there's no reporters out there anymore. These are all political propagandists.
And I think this is something we talked about last week. We were talking about Nikita Khrushchev said, destroy America without firing a shot. And that goes directly back into these things. You have the mainstream media telling us what's going on in the world and putting their spin on it. So the masses believe what the mainstream media tells them. And how do we know for certain that any of the stuff that we're hearing on TV is accurate or even existed or happened at all? The way we understand and know about what's going on in the world is by way of the mainstream media. Because I don't live in Afghanistan. I've never been to Afghanistan. I don't know anybody from Afghanistan. So if I'm going to find out what's going on in Afghanistan, I depend on the media. But what if they're not telling the truth? Then my perception of everything is flawed and skewed, and I'm going to be led down whatever path they lead me. We need to wake up and start asking questions and go to news outlets like the rest of the news where you're getting information that's not filtered through the mainstream media because they are, I believe, bought and paid for.
They're powerful. The media, if they want to make it look bad, like this army of young men that are trying to get in over the southern border of the United States, they're not going to show you the young men. They're just going to show you the 1 out of 100 who's a woman, some small child, and make the whole thing look ridiculous.
And all this thing about being compassionate and humanitarian, we look at those situations. And you're looking at a situation, again, it goes back to when it was created. In the aftermath of World War II, when the communists were expanding all into Europe and all that, we set up a program to have those people escaping from that to be able to come into the country. Part of that's being used today as the cover for all of this thing about these carnivals. And all of these things are all part of that ultimate effort to destroy. You look at California, for example, 30, 40 years ago, people like Ronald Reagan got elected and other things that were going on there that no longer exist. The southern border, Arizona and parts of Texas that were never like that, they've all infiltrated that because they are not part of the American culture or anything else that built this country. And the media and others don't want them to be.
A doctor called me, I think it was been about 2 days ago, and he is into public health. And he says that TB is expanding, and he's saying most of the people with TB today are from outside the United States, and that when they come in, it used to be if somebody came in the country, they'd get a chest x-ray, a blood test, and see if they've got typhoid fever or TB or something like that. They would get them well before they'd let them in.
Classic example of history was Ellis Island. What they do before they could come in, they were given complete physicals and all that, treated, or others, or some of them were sent back. And what you just mentioned, the doctor, over 6,000 have been identified in part of this that are there at the border. And there's another problem. There's a thing like polio, another virus, and other things that are there. And these things are not being treated. Again, you've got that kind of a situation. It has nothing to do with humanitarian or anything else. It's the fact that it was deliberate, and organizations that have sponsored, financed, pushed this caravan concept. It's another level. And as you were saying earlier about the media, and this is another part that worries me because the average person, their instincts and others say, this is not right. And most of them have been turned off to the point that they don't listen to any of it. And so they're not getting anything, and there's no sources that they can go to. My suggestion to everybody I talk to is pick up a history book. Take a look at what the heck is going on.
Well, this same doctor said there was one guy came into Jefferson County I think it was last year, and he had very resistant TB. And they put him on several of these expensive medicines to try to find one that would keep him going. And they said they spent about half of their public health budget on this one guy who had resistant TB.
You have to realize it's all about power. This whole thing is about power. Why would American politicians want to have such an influx of non-Americans into our country? And you have to understand, when these people who are in the country illegally now, if they're given citizenship and they're allowed to keep having babies and more of them are allowed to come into our country, eventually they're going to get citizenship. If you're born in this country, what happens 18 years later? You can vote. Now, who are these people going to vote for? And what agenda are they going to vote for? It's all about the Democrats because they can't do it legitimately. Policies and their philosophies just do not work legitimately. So bring all these people in illegitimately and then give them citizenship so they can vote Democrat. It's all about power. It's all about subversion of the American will. It's really obvious. I just don't know why no one is looking at this or acting on it. And I'm really disappointed in Republican leadership because anytime somebody says boo to them, they kowtow and backpedal instead of standing up for the principles, the agenda that we voted them into Congress to take care of. They backpedal. It's not doing anybody any good.
A lot of this is political in the sense that they want to get this whole caravan of young men across the border, get them to vote Democrat.
I want to talk about the deep state. That's the deep state in operation right there. They're trying to subvert the will of the American people and using our own rules and regulations to do it.
Another part of that that's being discussed at all is the drug cartels.
Absolutely.
And the MS-13. And because it's billions of dollars, recent article about the suicide rates and the number of addictions and fatalities resulting from overdoses. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. I've talked to people who talk about truckloads of cash crossing the border back to South America and others, and Iran and others are sending narcotics into the Central America and South America and filtering it up through Mexico into the United States. All of that is another part of this thing that finances another level of that activity.
And I can speak to that firsthand because I was a police officer here in Louisville for over 20 years, and I recall one night sitting in a house at a kitchen table and counting out $1,064,000 in cash by hand. It took us all night long, and we seized about 2,400 pounds of Mexican marijuana from an illegal immigrant. There's a lot of money going back and forth here, a lot of our money being shipped south of the border to fund these drug cartels that are killing us. They're killing us physically, they're killing us spiritually and morally, they're killing us health-wise. It's ridiculous that these things are being allowed to continue. And when you get a president who comes in and says no more, he's fought by every facet of the government. That alone should say something. You have all these liberal federal judges reminding him on just about every decision he makes, even when they're decisions that he has constitutional authority to make those decisions, and block them. And then it takes forever to get it through the U.S. Supreme Court. And then sometimes they block him. It's just depressing almost.
We're going to have to close, but I go back to Khrushchev, who stood up and pounded on the table and said, we're going to bury America without firing a shot. And Soros has jumped in to take his place. The first thing he wanted to do was take prayer out of our schools. He knew that if we could get God out of a whole generation, that America would be in trouble. Rich Pearson and Ed Holloway, God bless you. And God bless our listeners tuning in next week for the rest of the news. Hi, I'm Dr. Frank Simon. I'm an allergist and family doctor, board certified in both allergy and internal medicine. I specialize in allergy, headaches, sinus, hives, cough, asthma, hypertension, and diabetes. We're located at 1404 Browns Lane near Norton Suburban Hospital. Our phone number is 895-5088. We can see you tomorrow. Hello, this is Frank Simon with the rest of the news, and our special guest today is Rich Pearson.
Hello, Dr. Simon. How are you?
What was your rank in the police department?
When I was on Louisville Metro Police, I did 22 years of service there, and I retired at the rank of lieutenant.
Lieutenant?
Yeah.
I keep getting material in the mail, and here's some that I've gotten recently. Judicial Watch, and they sent a group down to Central America somewhere and started questioning the people in the caravan.
You mean the invasion?
Yeah, the invasion. That's right. And they asked them, why are you coming and what's this all about? And they said, oh, well, we want more money and more jobs and everything. The other thing is they said that they were getting a lot of money from the OSF, which is the Open Society Foundation, which is George Soros' organization that he keeps putting a lot of money into. So I thought that was very interesting that the people down there said, oh, yeah, we're getting money from George Soros.
Well, you knew there had to be money coming from somewhere because that larger crowd of people couldn't travel that distance on foot without having some type of logistical support, food, water, shelter, something. They had to be getting money from somewhere. Apparently, Soros is one of the sources.
And apparently they get some transportation, too. They put them on a bus and take them a while.
Right. I've actually heard, and I'm not sure which American politician it was, but I've heard of an American politician, at least one, who was using some of their campaign funds on the invasion. I'm sure the people who contributed to his campaign weren't contributing to the invasion, and I'm sure he was probably getting a little bit of money on the side from Soros as well.
I remember hearing that just before the election. It's quite a thing to think that there are people in America paying for an invasion of the United States.
I just can't wrap my mind around anyone would do that. I understand why the people want to come here. That doesn't make it right. It's still breaking American law, but I understand why those people want to come here. And I think to agree they've been deceived. They've been told if you come here, you're going to be able to walk across the border with no problems. Once you get here, it's going to be the land of milk and honey taken care of. I think they're starting to see that the reality is something different when President Trump sent some troops down to the border and actually enforcing the standing law that's on the books already. It's amazing that our politicians don't want to enforce our own laws.
It's amazing that people will put a lot of money into causing trouble. Like these guys, like you said, they were basically an army of young men coming in here. There is almost no women and children.
I think at least 90% the invasion caravan, that's what I'll call it, was young fighting age men. Why is it that we are tasked with responsibility of taking care of able-bodied men who can take care of themselves? When you see it on the mainstream media, all you see are women and children at the fronts of the camera shots. They don't give you a whole lot of shots of all the men, the majority of men in the invasion caravan.
I guess it was in one of these articles that George Soros basically owns the mainstream media.
He owns quite a bit of America behind the scenes. There is a YouTube channel called Grindall61, Grindall 61 on YouTube. It's a conservative YouTube channel in Southern California, and they have videotaped this invasion caravan in Tijuana. So these aren't, as it's been characterized, a peaceful caravan of people seeking a better life. This is a group of rowdy, to a certain degree, thugs who are trying to force their way to our country.
The media doesn't say anything about that. It says a rowdy group of about 600 men, ages 17 to 41, marching north on a narrow two-lane highway. And they said, well, yeah, we're here to get more money.
Do we really need 600 more unemployed people coming into the country wanting us to take care of them? That's unreasonable. That's completely unreasonable. I have no idea why every politician in Washington isn't jumping up and down. Every governor in the state sending troops down to the southern border to keep these people out, because once they cross the border, they spread all across the country. No idea who they are, where they are, what they're doing, what their histories are, if they're criminal or not, if they're committing crimes in our country or not. You hear stories day after day on the news, and there's probably a lot more that we don't hear about, of illegal immigrants committing crimes, some heinous crimes, rape, robbery, murder, and then they're allowed to get out by liberal judges before ICE can even get to them to pick them up to deport them. So the cycle just perpetuates itself. And when I was on the police department, this is something I saw routinely. We would have contact with illegal immigrant, and they would give us, typically they wouldn't have any form of identification on them. They would give us a name, and we'd see that same person a week later, and they would give us a totally different name.
Oh, really?
Because they had no identification on them, and they knew there was no way, even if we took them to jail, the only name that jail would have for them is the name that they supplied. Get out of jail, change your name, and go right back to it. So
with a different name.
Just make up a different name as you go along. And then there are states now that are starting to give state-issued IDs to illegal immigrants and giving them driver's licenses, state assistance, and things of this nature. We have homeless people laying out on the street, American soldiers, American veterans, American women and children living in these tent cities in countries all over the United States. But we're spending money, our politicians and people like George Soros are spending money to bring in more people that we can't take care of. We need to take care of our own before we even think about taking care of somebody else, in my opinion.
And he says there's a lot of special interest aliens, which is they abbreviate SIA. And these are people from Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Angola, from all around. And then he says there are a lot of gang members in this group, such as MS-13, who are violent gang members. Then there are some what they call coyotes, who are smuggling people in across the border for money.
They hang out on the Mexican side of the border and they prey on these desperate Mexicans who are wanting to come into the United States. And they say, if you give me X number of thousands of dollars, I will use my connections to get you across the border. Well, sometimes they get them across the border. Sometimes they die in transit. But if they do successfully get them across the border, once they arrive in the United States, the coyote says, well, the $5,000 you gave me wasn't enough. I ran into some problems, so I need $2,000 more. And brother. Obviously the victim doesn't have it. So the coyote says, well, you're going to have to work for me, or you're going to have to work for this organization until you pay off this money. So basically they become slaves to this coyote, or they're forced to work for the Mexican drug cartels.
And then there's networks in the United States that are legal services programs that will, I guess, support these people that they get across the border. Clinic was one of the foundations of Cara Family Detention pro bono projects, reportedly helped to coordinate another group, People Without Borders. Again, it's talking about the Open Society Foundation, which is a George Soros foundation. And then they got, who is involved in the current caravan, was previously a coordinator with CARA, C-A-R-A project. These people are getting a lot of money from the Open Society Foundation of George Soros.
George Soros is basically an international criminal. I think Russia has a standing order. He's supposed to be arrested on sight if he sets foot on Russian soil. He seeks to destabilize monetary systems globally. He seeks to destabilize national sovereign governments globally. And the only reason I can see that he would want to do that is he's working toward a one world government in a one world currency, which he can control behind the scenes because he's a billionaire many times over. It's ridiculous that one man is being allowed to manipulate and destabilize entire nations and cause all the havoc worldwide that he is causing. He's manipulating and controlling the mainstream media in the United States. And if you stop and think about it, the only way that the American people know what's going on in the world is the media. We use that information that we get from the media to form our views on the world. So we can, that information that we receive from the media is what we use to decide how we feel about politicians, how we feel about economic structures, how we feel about basically everything. And if the media, the information providers, are being manipulated by George Soros, then the American public, the American mindset is being manipulated by George Soros.
That's right.
And that cannot be allowed to continue.
Here's a bunch of organizations that are helping this caravan. Let's see, the leftist organizations receiving OSF, Open Society Foundation, from George Soros finances, which are reportedly promoting, organizing, and supporting the caravan. He's got more in here. He says the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights has received $3.3 million from Open Society Foundation of George Soros since 2016. The organization sued the Trump administration over the migration effective order and the inclusion of citizenship question on the 2020 census form.
So we're not even allowed to ask if you're American, if you're on American soil. That's ridiculous.
And here's another one. I was surprised. Amnesty International received more than $300,000 from the George Soros group.
He's pushing his liberal agenda in a lot of different fashions and from a lot of different angles. And I think that YouTube video site that I mentioned a few minutes ago has some video footage of some of these illegal Mexicans where they're chanting undocumented, unafraid, and they're against pro-ICE Americans. I've also seen some footage myself on Fox News where some of these people in this invasion caravan are waving Mexican flags and saying down with USA, down with America. But they want to come into our country.
Brother.
So
yeah.
Let's use a little common sense and logic here. If these people already have anti-American feelings and are expressing anti-American sentiments before they even get into the United States, what do you think they're going to do once they're on American soil?
Yeah, they're going to cause trouble.
They're going to cause trouble, and they're going to take up our resources while they're causing trouble. If they get hurt, they don't have any money. They don't have any insurance. So if they get hurt, our hospitals won't refuse to treat them.
No.
So who's going to pay for that?
What was the name of that organization? That
Grind All 61.
Grind.
GRINDALL 61.
That's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's a YouTube channel.
The actual footage of what they're doing is
it's hard to come by.
Yeah.
Because the mainstream media doesn't want you to see that type of footage. They're still pushing the agenda that these are all peace-loving people who want just a piece of the American dream and they want to assimilate into America. And not everybody should get a piece of the American dream.
They say, oh, we're in trouble down where we live and we want asylum.
Well, that's the word they keep using. It's a buzzword that they can use to fall into a certain category that they can be considered for entry into the United States and monies and things of this nature. It's just a legal loophole is what it is.
We're talking about these problems, and the question is, what are we going to do about it? And there are a couple of things that I think we can do to help the situation. One is this video called The Life of Jesus. Probably some of our audience have already seen this. And the important thing about this is it's free.
Mm-hmm.
And we can send it to anyone that wants one. It's the birth, the miracles, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and an invitation. And we'd like to really send several of these out to every listener so they can take them to their church, give several to everyone in their church, and then they can go and give it to their relatives and neighbors and friends. There's a number on the back, an 800 number that you can call, and they're giving these out free. At least they were when we tried it. We think this is very important as far as the answer to a lot of these problems that we've been talking about. And the other thing we would like to encourage everyone is to get this petition that says, "In God We Trust." And we're trying to get this in every classroom. It's already been passed in Arkansas, and we've got the Arkansas bill, and we're trying to get it passed in Kentucky. And in order to get it passed, you've got to get a lot of people backing it. And everyone that signs this, we're going to call them and tell them the bill number when it gets a bill number,